Snowy Night. A story of resilience and entrepreneurship. The living room window pane trembled softly with the December wind. Outside, the first snowflakes were falling like tiny gifts from the sky, landing on the windowsill and melting slowly, as if they had arrived late to a meeting. Maria stepped closer to the glass and closed her eyes for a moment. In the kitchen, the roast filled the house with its aroma. From the hallway came the laughter of the children arguing over who would hang the last star on the tree. In the background, an old record her father had brought played, crackles and bells woven together. It was Christmas Eve. "Mom!" Anna, the oldest, 12 years old and full of authority, shouted from the hallway. "Grandma said we can taste the pudding if you say yes. Only if each of you promises to help set the table," Maria answered, smiling, her eyes still fixed on the street, already dressing itself in white. João, her husband, appeared beside her as if by chance, rested his hand on her back and stood there in silence for a while, following the path of the flakes in the air. "You know," he said, "whenever it starts snowing like this, I remember the other Christmases when we barely had money for bread and drew Christmas trees on the fogged-up window to trick the kids." Maria laughed, but her eyes shone with something else, a deeper, parallel light. It wasn't exactly sadness. It was memories. She laid her hand on his. "I remember too. And sometimes it still feels like it was just yesterday." From the hallway, the small steps of Lucas and Anna came rushing in, tripping over the rug. They carried the final star as if it were a treasure. "Mom, can you put it on?" Lucas asked. "Me." Maria cleared her throat and straightened her shoulders. "You can put it on yourself." And when he raised his arms to fit the star at the top of the tree, she felt the warm weight of the present and the soft echo of the past, like when you climb a step that used to be so much higher. Everything that came before, she thought. Everything that brought us here. And the snow on the other side of the glass kept falling in the exact measure of a miracle that doesn't need noise to exist. On that same couch where her children now sat, Maria had once counted coins. It wasn't just one night. There were many months in which she and João took turns between dreams and bills, and the bills, in turn, traded places with the threats sliding in under the door. The overdue rent. The lights flickering as if they knew they could go out at any moment. The refrigerator, sovereign and empty, reigning over the silence. It was during that time that she learned how to iron hope. It was a small gesture. She folded her work clothes and, as she passed the iron over them, repeated to herself that the heat, somehow, also reached what wasn't fabric. Sometimes she cried quietly while the steam rose, as if the clothes themselves exhaled a feeling she couldn't name. One afternoon she almost gave up. The bus had broken down, it was raining, her shoes were soaked on the way, and her boss had called her into the office to say, "The market is tough right now, you understand, it's nothing personal." Maria left with an envelope that had no weight, and a dignity that weighed heavily inside. That night, João made garlic pasta and said it was a feast. They ate slowly, laughing at the exaggeration of the word, and when the children fell asleep, 3 of them crammed into the same bed so it would look like a fun game, not necessity. The 2 of them stayed up, calculating by candlelight. "We're going to make it," João said, with not much certainty in his voice. "Yes, we are," Maria replied, like someone casting a spell. "Because there are things we don't let fall." The next day, she woke up early and grabbed a hardback notebook she had kept from her unfinished college days. On the first page she wrote, "Inventory of resources," and listed my hands. Kids' laughter. Courage. Time to sew clothes for others. An old oven that still works. A friend who knows about computers. The pastor at church who knows people. My father's stories. My father's listening ear. It was little and, at the same time, it was a lot. A true treasure map without any gold, but with coordinates for survival. She started sewing for others. First, pant hems. Then patches that became almost art. Then party dresses people wanted to immortalize in photos. In one corner of the living room, she set up an improvised studio. The sewing machine inherited from her aunt, colorful threads in glass jars, a measuring tape hanging from the mirror. The children would draw imaginary dresses and leave her notes. "Mom, this one has a superhero cape." João built a wooden stand for the machine, hammering carefully so as not to wake anyone. But life doesn't improve like someone climbing a straight staircase. It improves like someone winding their way up a hill. The money that came in was the same that went straight back out the door to pay for medicine for Maria's parents, who had begun to feel the weight of time. Her mother, Mrs. Irene, had been a fortress that finally discovered its own crack. The diagnosis came on a clear morning, and the word treatment arrived hand in hand with numbers, dates, and fears. Her father, Mr. Adeo, whose hands had always been steady, now trembled when he signed papers. Faced with this, the notebook gained another section. Things I can only do today. Sometimes the list had a single line, breathe. On other days there were so many items she wrote in tiny letters, as if trying to trick the space on the page. One night the power finally went out. The overdue bill had caught up with them. The children whimpered, but João lit candles and said they would put on a shadow play. Maria, exhausted, laughed on the inside at the show. Little rabbits on the ceiling, a castle made from fingers, a moon formed by the palm of a hand. The candlelight revealed on her face a courage that, from being used so often, already seemed part of her skin. And in that dim light, Maria made a silent promise. Next Christmas, this table will be full. I'll find a way. She didn't tell anyone about that promise. She tucked it into the notebook like a wrinkled flower between pages. Winter was still long, and the snowflakes had started landing without melting so quickly. The months followed the rhythm of the sewing machine. The needle went back and forth, and Maria learned something that would serve her for life. Fabric has memory. If you pull it the wrong way, it marks. If you guide it with patience, it yields. People she discovered are like that too. One day, a young woman named Rebecca showed up at the door carrying a folder. She'd heard about Maria's hands through a church client. She wanted to know if Maria would be willing to sew little capes and crowns for a children's play at the neighborhood school. The pay was modest, but the job came with deadlines, measurements, and the thrill of seeing children on stage. "I'll do it," Maria said without thinking twice. She spent her nights sewing blue and yellow fabrics, delicate lace, buttons like stars. When the play opened, there were her children in the audience, pointing proudly at the stage. "My mom made those." Little by little, Maria's work gained recognition. People talked, neighbors recommended her. She realized that sewing wasn't just joining threads. It was adjusting lives. Once, a woman brought her mother's dress, her mother already gone, and asked that it be transformed so she could wear it on her wedding day. Maria worked as if she were embroidering a farewell that was, at the same time, a reunion. With the money saved, she paid off overdue bills. On installments, she bought another sewing machine. She built a small shelf with neatly labeled notions and supplies, and hung a little bell on the living room door that rang whenever someone came in. The studio had a name now. Sun Patches. Lucas had come up with it, saying his mom sewed rays of sun into cloudy days. Mrs. Irene was able to undergo treatment with dignity. There were days when she couldn't hide her exhaustion, but she insisted on peeling potatoes and seasoning the beans the way Maria liked. After his appointments, Mr. Adeo would sit by the window to tell stories of when he was a boy and the town didn't even have traffic lights yet. Slowly, fear lost some of its volume in their lives. As in every new entrepreneur's journey, there were stumbles. An order delivered late because the thread ran out on a Sunday, a client who cancelled at the last minute, the machine that jammed on the day she had 3 dresses to finish, the bus that never came, the body that didn't want to get up, the budget that wouldn't balance. And then there was a major blow, the kind that makes your heart pound in your ears. One autumn afternoon, João lost his job at the carpentry shop. The news came in the same kind of scary envelope Maria already knew too well. This time, though, they had a network. João started helping at the studio, cutting patterns with a craftsman's precision. He built shelves, fixed hinges, and made a clothes rack out of leftover PVC pipes. The house, once shrunken, seemed to gain an extra room, the room where creativity fit. The notebook gained another section. Christmas plan. It was no longer just a secret promise. It was a strategy. Maria listed which dishes each person knew how to make, simple and meaningful gifts, invitations to her parents, the tablecloth saved for special occasions, the paper ornaments she and the kids would craft. There was one item she circled in red ink. Give thanks. Not out of obligation but out of accuracy, like putting the final stitch in exactly the right place. And so, almost without fanfare, life found a new rhythm. Not the old one, because before belongs to a country we never go back to, but a new beat, learned by heart, where scarcity and abundance sit side by side on the same shelf, like jars of different sizes that, from a distance, still make up one kitchen. That Christmas night, Maria's house smelled of garlic and cinnamon. The old music kept the silverware company, and the snow outside decorated the world without charging anything for it. The table was set with a white cloth embroidered by Mrs. Irene 20 years earlier, fabric now carrying stories and a few stains that time. The master of what is acceptable had taught them not to hide. "Mom, can we put more lights in the window?" Elisa asked, truly believing that more lights made any food taste better. "I can," Maria said, fitting a string of twinkling lights on the nail João had hammered earlier. "But only if you stop stealing raisins from the dish." The doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Irene with bright red lipstick and a blue scarf, and Mr. Adeo wearing a hat he liked to call his going-out hat. As they stepped inside, they were greeted by a chorus of "Merry Christmas!" hugs, and the smell of the oven opening. "My daughter," said Mrs. Irene, holding Maria's face in her hands, "you brought the whole sky into this house." "No, Mom," Maria replied, feeling that any answer would be too small. "The sky came on its own. We just made room for it." João carved the roast, the children brought the salad, and someone placed a platter of rabanadas, sweet, cinnamon-dusted French toast, at the center of the table, the kind that soaks memories in sugar and spice. Before they began, Maria asked for a moment. She stood, looked around, and took a deep breath. The living room glowed like the Christmases of her childhood, when the world seemed like a snow globe someone had just shaken. But now there was something more, an awareness you only gain after long, hard winters. "I just wanted to say," she began, and her voice cracked. She laughed at her own stumble. "I wanted to say that this year was like sewing a very difficult fabric. Some parts slipped away from the needle, others tore. But together we made it fit. There were days I thought I wasn't going to make it, and then one of you would come along and tie a tiny knot in the thread, and I kept going. You're the one who held everything together, Maria," João said, his eyes shining. "Not by myself," she replied. "I sewed, but you all stayed firm on the other side, holding the fabric so it wouldn't wrinkle. And most of all," she looked at her parents, "you taught me that the table doesn't need to be big to be abundant. It just needs to be ours." Mrs. Irene made a small gesture with her hand, like a blessing. Mr. Adeo cleared his throat and said, "Then let's eat before it gets cold." Soft laughter like the tinkling of silverware. They served themselves. During dinner they traded stories. About the day Lucas got a star from his teacher for helping a friend, about the first shelf João sold on commission, made from reclaimed wood, and a bit of poetry, about the client who kissed Maria's hands for turning a morning dress into a party dress. At one point the lights flickered, a tiny scare, almost a joke. Then they steadied again. Maria smiled at the coincidence and, for a moment, saw herself back in the darkness of other nights, making shadow puppets. She thought of the promises that had been fulfilled like seeds that germinate underground before ever seeing the light. Later, when the house had the sound of a fed home, laughter, chairs scraping, dishes stacked in the sink, the record spinning patiently, Maria returned to the window. The snow was still falling, now in thicker flakes, as if someone had shaken a pillow in the sky. João came up beside her again. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking life is like this glass," she said, tapping lightly with her knuckles. "From inside we think we can see everything. But there's always a fogged-up spot. And even so, we learn to trust that what's on the other side is real, you know." He chuckled. "Half of my work this year was just that, believing in what I couldn't see yet." João slipped his arm around her shoulders. On the couch, the children watched a Christmas movie, wrapped in blankets. In the corner, Mrs. Irene dozed off, her scarf slightly askew, Mr. Adeo, sitting in the armchair, held his chin as if saving a thought for the next day. "I wrote you a letter," João said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. Maria opened it. Inside, there was a pencil drawing of her hands. Large hands with careful lines, a needle threaded between the fingers. Underneath he had written, "For the hands that stitched our hope." She didn't say anything because some silences speak best. She rested her head on his shoulder and stayed there for a while, listening to the discreet sounds of a peaceful home. Maria sat on the rug, the 4 children huddled close, João at her side, and her parents watching with the kind of smile of those who have seen many Christmases and know that no two are the same. Outside, the street calmed under a fresh white blanket. Inside, the living room felt like it was dawning, even though the night was still there. When the movie ended, she took the children to their room. She tucked each one in with a care that nearly passed for prayer. She turned off the light, left the door slightly ajar, and went back to the living room to clear the table with João. They stacked plates, gathered silverware, covered the serving dishes. The record reached its end with one last sigh. "Tomorrow we can finish the rest," João said. "Tomorrow we start all over again," Maria corrected him. She picked up the notebook from the sideboard. She opened it to the last section, Christmas plan, now full of crossed-out items. On the next page she wrote, "Epiphany." And below it, "The hard things didn't disappear. They learned to share space with the good things. There's always room for one more at the table. The snow falls outside. The light is born inside. Promise kept. The table is full." She closed the notebook. She looked at João, at her parents, at the tree with the star she herself had placed, at the little lights reflected in the glass. And for the first time in a long while, she felt that her story was not a road pushing her along, but a path she knew how to choose, step by step, stitch by stitch. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, a woman named Maria, mother, daughter, wife, seamstress, realized that, unlike the snow, what they had built would not melt. Needed care, yes. It needed the repeated gesture of someone who knows that love, too, is washed, dried, folded, put away, and the next day put on again. She turned off the lights, leaving only the tree lit. The room began to breathe in a different way. And the night, satisfied, slowly drew the curtains over the window, still allowing one last snowflake to land and glimmer on the windowsill, reminding everyone that when hope finds a home, winter becomes a gift, not a sentence.